research that's equally valuable.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, I'm Franny Knight,
I'm Damon Patterson.
and this is the
KC Dev Report.
Episode number 10. I
It's our
cannot
10th
believe
episode.
we are on 10. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
Woohoo! Every week we do one, so there are 9 others that if you're new to watching us, you need to go check out our other 9 episodes, and they can find those where at?
You can find them on the KC Dev Report page, or you can find them at the KC Dev Report website, which is the devreport.com. And you can also find it on all the major podcast platforms. Yeah.
So I'm going to let Damon talk first about what he did most the initial research and found some things that I thought were interesting. But Damon, what were the highlights for you when you were doing the research on this?
Highlights were so we do. Let me say this. So we do past, present, and future developments in Kansas City, and this is technically our first show that we're doing purely on something that has already finished and taken place. And we chose it because 71 Highway is something that's very familiar with anyone that's living in Kansas City. You have to know about 71 or use 71. And it's a pretty large development that took place. So that was one of the interests, is something that was really, it's a huge development, and it took a really long time for the development to happen. Researching it, it took 50 years from when the discussions began about a south to downtown connection, which was in 1951, to it being when it was complete, which was in the 2001. So that was what really interests me. And during the research is always a weird rabbit hole, but this one had me all the way back in the 1800s, just kind of looking at the history of highways in America and how they came about, the first highways, where they were, what they were named, how they were funded. So it got pretty interesting whenever you start doing research, and it goes, you're reading stuff all the way back to the 1800s, and you start looking at, hand-drawn maps and stuff.
Right. Yeah. So anything else that was really a standout for you in this research?
One thing that was a standout was learning that a major reason that this highway was created was for connecting Army bases. It was, for the Department of Defense, or the Army and the military, to be able to, one, connect Army bases, and be prepared for if some type of invasion or war broke out. They were thinking that they needed highways to be able to move about quickly. So I thought that was interesting, that a large part of the real purpose that the highway was created was for the military.
Yeah, and it was one of the first, Eisenhower first major money for highways. And actually, my husband told me this morning it was because they were noticing in Germany what great highways they had in Germany, and how they were moving their military hardware around very quickly.
Yeah.
And so that's what our leadership,
It's like, hey, we need that
like
here.
we need that here. And so it started out, I think, to be a really great idea, and that's where a lot of our interstate highways came into existence after that. But then the moving into the cities, like 71 Highway was just not quite what it was supposed to be, but there was money. So, anytime city leadership, businesses, developers get an opportunity to get federal money, because it was like, what, 90% federal money and 10% state money. But it was a lot of money. I mean, it was like hard to turn down. And so I think, if we were in their shoes at that time, we also might have thought, well, gosh, this looks like a great opportunity for us. But the craziest thing is, again, I'm not from Kansas City, so I didn't watch any of that progress happen, or my parents, I didn't hear about it from, family and people around me. My husband did. He knew all about it. He knew everything about every step of that happening along the way, and how many stops and starts it had, because it was going into the court.
Yeah.
It was being fought constantly. I mean, like, why would it take 50 years to build a highway? And that was also, I knew it had taken long, but I didn't know exactly why it took so long. I didn't know it took so long, and then why. And it was just because the 71 Highway was such a disruptor of neighborhoods. And already with the Truce Dividing Line coming into play, 71 Highway, which was originally were going to put it in Brookside, right?
Yeah, originally they were looking at putting the highway Brookside, and of course that did not happen. I guess if you can imagine, if that disruption took place there, and I'm sure they fought that hard, and at the end of the day they looked at where it is now as cheaper. It was cheaper and easier to do.
Right.
Yeah.
But the reason why and again, you're helping me to learn this. The reason why they had picked Brookside was the streetcar was running down, and so they were thinking that they could replace the streetcar, which is another whole highlight for me, is that at that time Kansas City was a streetcar city, and urban planners, from what I've read, will say that a streetcar culture for a city is a much more friendly, more neighborhood, more community building than highways running through.
Third space. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I just can't imagine here we are now back into bringing back streetcars, bringing back bike lanes, and making it more pedestrian, bike friendly. That is all about, bringing the community together, but we still have the 71 Highway that is dividing the city from east to west. So the fighting in the court was constant battle with the neighborhoods that the highway was going to go through. The businesses, people who owned homes, were very upset that it was going to destroy their neighborhoods, and it literally did. You know. Now, the other thing that was interesting, like I've always, because again, I'm not from Kansas City, so when I drive on 71 Highway, I'm always like, why is it that it's a boulevard with stoplights from 75th to Swope Parkway exit, right? Or just past the 49th Street exit, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's
the last light.
Yeah.
I think it's
that
49.
would be
or maybe it's 55th. I think you're right. I think it's 55th. Sorry.
Gregory.
I'm not from here. So,
it's a few in that last stretch. It's a few. It's
right.
Like, 55th, 59th, 63rd, and I think that's
75th is another light. There's a light at 75th Street too, and then it turns back into a highway. But north of 55th, it becomes a highway.
Yeah.
And so I always, like, as a newbie in Kansas City, I'm not new anymore, but I always wondered, why do I have to stop at all these lights, and then it's no lights until downtown, and then I'm only talking about how the highways do groovy things downtown.
So
But-
that south stretch that you're talking about with where those stop lights are and that speed is part of the compromise. Like you mentioned earlier, it was tied up in litigation because people were complaining about what the plan was, and that part where you're talking, that south stretch, the compromise was to downgrade it from highway or freeway into being more of a parkway
Right.
for that stretch.
Right.
That's literally why that's like that. It was one
Right.
of the compromises.
Right. And I don't know if you all have seen, I have, and the Mamie Hughes Bridge, which I think is at 63rd Street or Meyer. It's a really pretty bridge, right, with the iron work and the stone work. And beautiful bridge. It's a great bridge to name after her. So she was the ombudsman at the time she was selected. She lived in the neighborhood to be the person to lead the community, the neighborhood, to make that compromise happen. She was a very important person in that, and it was a one-of-a-kind position. Nobody, that was very interesting to me as well. But can you imagine 10,000 houses? 10,000, and where did they go? They didn't give them enough money to go buy another house, so they ended up in...
Well, people's families got spread around and broken up, really.
Right.
And these were, when you look at it, these were generational houses. These were, houses that were in people's family for a long time.
By the time I got to Kansas City, it had already been built, so I didn't know anything going on. Yeah, but you had. I mean, you were in your teens, I think, when it was being built.
I can remember when it was. Well, I can remember the vacant land that it left, because that stretch of land, most of it I think was around between Chestnut and Prospect, where there was just blocks of just vacant land. So they had came through and grazed and took houses and tore it down, and then it just sat there for, I want to say, decades. It was just, but you didn't. I mean, as a teenager, I wasn't really aware of what that was.
Right.
But it was. We stayed across the street from there at one point on 50th and Chestnut, and it was literally like you look out your door and there's just like a vacant lot across the street and up the street, and it was like that for a long time. So they tore those houses down, and then it was just I feel like it just stopped, or well, now I know from doing the research, it was caught up in litigation all that time. So those people lost their homes, had to find somewhere else to go, and it created this kind of block in between the neighborhoods where it just sat there vacant for years. It was just that's just a part of the neighborhood. It's like vacant lot up in
Yeah.
I mean, and that's,
it'd be interesting to talk to your mom or your sister or aunties about what they remember about it too. I think probably your parents' generation would probably have a little bit more
because that would have been
about it, because
60s
they probably
and 70s, which is kind of interesting to think about. That was going on in the 60s and 70s.
Right. Yeah. I read an article, and we'll post this article in the show notes for next week. But you could go check it out. It's on Strong Towns, and it was about how these highways in all the cities actually really tore cities apart and segregated them, created dividing lines more than just anything. That's something I'm wanting to dive into a little bit more, just to learn about that, because I didn't know that. Again, coming from out of Kansas City, I've always just thought Troost was the problem. Troost was our dividing line, and it is. I mean, it's not like that just disappeared in my head, but to know that 71 Highway and other highways like this that were built in other cities were probably the bigger problem than Troost itself. It's just fascinating to me.
Well, yeah, you just gotta imagine neighborhoods. If we talk about like progress and whatnot, and people having pride in their neighborhoods and building their neighborhoods up, and then something comes along and just wipes that out
Mm-hmm.
and leaves. I mean, you can say a scar in a sense. I mean, if we look at it from, an aerial shot, it is kind of a scar that runs down the middle of the city. It's just a blank spot. And some of the research was, it talked about how that affects property values because people don't usually want to live next to a highway.
Mm-hmm.
So the houses that are near the highway, their value drops.
Right.
Because people don't want to live
Right.
right by a highway.
Right. Right.
So they literally, the property value dropped, and there's literally a wall
Mm-hmm.
in between you and another neighborhood. And there's all sorts of stuff. I mean, not only homes were demolished, but businesses as well
Right. Yeah.
were demolished. So that's another thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So fascinating. Okay. So again, we just to repeat, we're going to cover this next Thursday again. We're going to go a little deeper, but what we really want is to get some more community input from people to give us some comments. You can go to either Damon's, which you're on, Damon's page. You can come to my page. You can go to the KC Development page, Urban Cool KC page. You can go anywhere, and you can email us. My email is franny@urbancoolkc.com, and Damon's, yours is
1809truths@gmail.com.
So any way you want to get hold of us to give us some input, or maybe you have a story you want to tell, we would love to share these stories next Thursday, along with the research and the facts and stuff. It would probably be a little bit longer of a show next week, but we'd really like to get some community input on this.
Yeah.
I think that might be very interesting. I think.
Yeah. I think so.
Are we ready for that?
Yeah, I think we're ready for it.
I'm
And this
ready
is
for
and this is coming back up. I know if you're paying attention to what's going on in politics at all, the infrastructure bill is being talked about and discussed, and part of that infrastructure bill is to try to correct. I don't know how they can do that, but there's discussions about correcting the damage that highways have done to communities in the infrastructure bill. I find that interesting, and I also don't know how you can correct that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I've seen some discussions about removing highways, and
Uh-huh.
I don't necessarily think that that's
Mm-mm.
not the way to go. But
I don't either. Now I do like
never
the
know with
idea of
politics,
the
but-
lid
yeah,
that they've been talking about and putting on the downtown. Is it 670 or 70? The one in between. Is it the one between
You're talking about
River
the loop.
Market and downtown?
was that 70?
The 70. Yeah. So
Yeah.
they're talking about putting a lid, which would really be a great idea. That would make a great connector. Lid is just it would be like a park almost.
Yeah.
That goes over.
I did see
it's
that.
a concrete bridge
They're
almost
talking
over
about how to
the highway.
connect Crossroads with downtown,
Right,
because that highway is a wall and
Right.
disrupts that section.
right.
So they're talking about putting
A lid.
a lid.
It's called a lid.
Yeah.
I learned that. I've been following that.
Interesting.
That's one that I'm very interested in the lid. I would be for that. I'd be for a lid over tearing out a highway because that seems like
I think it's
years
kind
of
of counterintuitive
destruction.
to destroy something,
Yeah,
let it be for so long, and then
yeah.
what do you destroy it and then you put houses back there, or I don't think removing the highway is
I don't know.
smart.
I mean, we already have enough land for infill for buildings, so let's
Yeah,
do that first.
yeah.
That's my opinion, but I'm not. But as we've told you before, we are not planners, urban
are
planners,
not
not developers. We're just we just love Kansas City. That's why we're putting this podcast and show on, just because we want to just discuss with the rest of you everything that's going on in Kansas City that's interesting to us and interesting to you all as well. So,
Yeah.
all right. So ready to call it a night?
Yeah.
Okay. All
Okay.
right. So we're going to call it a night. We would like for you to come back next Thursday. hopefully we're going to have some more. We will have some more stories and information from people, personal opinions, etc. on this, and we're going to cover the facts again and get some input going on. So, all right. So,
I'm David Patterson.
and I'm Franny Knight.
And this is the KC Dev Report.
That's equally valuable.